Good evening. I'm Jim Gierach, and welcome to the third edition of Chicago's War on Drugs. Today is April 18th, 2017, 2 days after the Easter weekend. Sadly, it was another violence-laden Prohibition Chicago weekend. We suffered 45 people shot and 2 killed. 2 more teenagers were killed today. The 2017 Chicago shooting tally now stands at 117 people shot. The Illinois 2015 opioid fentanyl prohibition death tally now stands at 1,400 dead. Our heart goes out to every overdose and gunshot victim across every Chicago neighborhood. Chicagoans march against violence, gangs, guns, and overdose, but we must do more than just march. During this 13-week series, Chicago's War on Drugs, we will ask everyone to think and ask the central question: which is worse, drugs or the war on drugs? There is no right or wrong answer on this show. This is simply an important heart-to-heart discussion regarding drug prohibition. This 13-week series is brought to you courtesy of Azteca Baseball League, a not-for-profit organization that can be reached at Azteca Baseball League at the website shown. drugnews1@yahoo.com is another way, and the phone number shown. This is a call-in show. And participation by Chicagoans is certainly welcome and beyond. Our telephone number is listed on the screen, 312-738-1060. This evening it is my pleasure to introduce to you Julie Falco. Julie Falco is a longtime advocate for the reform of marijuana laws. You know, we have made so little progress with prohibition of harder substances that feed the gangs, the guns, the violence, the overdose, so many of our problems. But there's one area where we have made progress, and that is certainly in part due to the work of Julie Falco, who is a board member of the National Organization National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, and the Illinois chapter. She's on the board of directors. So I would like to welcome you to the show, and we're going to tell Chicago a little bit about you.
Well, thank you, Jim. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here. But you have an important story to tell. You were a young girl, and something entered your life that was a surprise.
Certainly was. I was in college, actually. It was back in the 80s. It was 1986. I first had symptoms where I was home for a spring break and just had noticed I had a limping. I was dragging my left foot and really was odd, and I didn't know what that was. What was going on. I thought maybe I was just being lazy on spring break and my foot fell asleep or something, but that progressed through the week, and we went to see a doctor, and at the time they didn't know what was going on, and they really wanted me to stay to get more testing and that, but I had to go back to school and go back to my classes, so I just kind of ignored it and went back to business, went back to school, and why I had to go back was, at the time I was playing in a band, and we had a couple of performances that same weekend, going back to school, and the first night I could only sit on a bar stool for the whole show because my whole left side was very stiff and clenched to my body. The following night we had another performance in which by the end of the night, the last set that we did, I couldn't move. I couldn't perform at all, so I sat that last set out. And at the end of it, they had to take me to the hospital after that. still not knowing what. Many tests one after the other, and finally came to Chicago, went through numerous testing, wasn't sure what was going on. So finally, everything went back to normal for 2 years, and then I got symptoms, did get tested, had an MRI and CAT scan, and they did verify that it was multiple sclerosis. And so about that time in the 80s, there were not a lot of treatments. There wasn't really anything that they could give you to help you with symptoms or things as you're going through it. So I really followed what the doctors at the time told me, and sought out answers on my own, but did follow for the different symptomatic relief of taking different medications, muscle relaxers.
What kind of response did you get from the medicines that were prescribed conventionally?
Everything I took, I was very sensitive and got side effects from everything that I took. And during the course of many years, through the 90s and on, it was like I could feel the side effects, but I wasn't sure. Sometimes I thought they were symptoms of the MS. So taking Valium, Xanaflex, muscle relaxers, anything to help the symptoms.
Did you get relief from any of these conventional medicines?
Very little. And then they really just left me under a cloud of just lethargy. I couldn't really get out of bed. I really had a hard time, maneuvering or doing things in the day, and I would have a lot of numbness and tingling because of the MS. Certainly numbness and tingling in my limbs, the weakness, fatigue, incontinence, you name it. I had all kinds of symptoms and was taking all kinds of pills to alleviate the symptoms, and I just felt depressed and lethargic and didn't want to get up during the day. And it got into right before this movement, about 2003 or 4, I was really considering, ending my life, thinking if this is the progression, this is where it's going. This isn't fun. Not that it is, but it was not wanting me to get up during a day.
Now, I remember being on a college campus with you where we were both speaking, and I was just so impressed and taken by what you had shown the students at that campus with the different types of things that you had been prescribed to try to make yourself well within the rules of the law that our senators and representatives made.
Right.
And you brought that carpet bag with you today?
You see that, yeah. So this is, I emptied the bag out, but you can see that. You figure it's a collection that I still have of many, many pill bottles of all the different treatments that many patients go through. It's how many that you can take at one time. Find some
It's incredible.
relief that these really just over time got everything from muscle constriction to depression to more spasticity in my limbs.
I don't know if it's easier to see
Yeah.
it this way or easier to see it this way, but
Yeah, I
there
guess
is
you're on
just,
the
if the cure came in a bottle, you should have been cured. And there's other things here besides pill bottles, I see.
Yeah, there was, I have syringes here for 10 years, little syringe packet that I would give myself subcutaneous injections of a medication that was supposed to slow the progression of the illness and lessen the attacks that I would get. And but for 10 years, every time I took this medication, it made me feel worse than I did the day before. I walked worse than I did the day before, and I would say 97% of the time I would get a massive migraine, headache the day after I would take that medicine. And so, when medicine is supposed to make you feel better, at least a little bit, this regimen did not work for me.
Eventually, did you try something else? How did that come about?
Well, yeah, that was the last probably the last thing right before I said, okay, I was just giving up. I just had no energy left to pursue every day, living every day. So I said, okay, that's it. I'm going to try one more thing. And all right, I will try cannabis. I was, of course, familiar with it being in a band, but I didn't smoke all the time because smoking for me kind of irritated headaches I would get. So I only did it when I needed it, trying to help with insomnia and ease the leg spasticity to just relax and so I could get some sleep. But I didn't really want to go through the smoking form for me. It didn't really wasn't as effective until I made a batch of brownies, not in the kind that you think, but for recreational wise. But I baked them in a pan and made them into just small 1-inch cube size pieces. And I took one of those pieces 3 times a day, like a regular medication that sells on these pill bottles. Mm-hmm. And it was more profound than anything that I had ever even come close to trying. It helped with that insomnia that was initially really doing the smoking for. It helped with the leg spasticity to calm things down. But I noticed that I had a little bit more muscle action, and I was walking better. Things were more relaxed. I had it helped with incontinence. I wasn't racing and feeling like I was going to fall on the floor just to get into the bathroom. Mm-hmm. And so it helped with a lot of that. It helped with some of the neuropathy in my legs too.
And what year was it that you started using cannabis?
2004. Well, about 2003, 2004.
Is cannabis the same thing as marijuana?
Well, in my mind, no.
You always associate cannabis with medicine, and many people think of marijuana as something recreationally, but chemically and the plant and so forth is really the same thing. Am I correct?
Well, yes. It's you say tomato, I say tomato. It's kind of like
okay.
that. Well, because when I started this, and that was when I started in 2004, and really eating it and noticing such a drastic difference, I was able to wean myself off all the medications I was on. And finally I said, okay, well, what can I do to help? There's got to be more people like me out there to,
mm-hmm.
to know about this, certainly. And finding out that we did have a law on the books already, that was a Cannabis Control Act that
said what?
It was basically for you and your physician, so you could be pretty much like a test subject in a way. So, okay, they would allow cannabis for the patient, but the doctor would have to always check in and monitor, and kind of like a study, to be like I would be under like a medical study. But it was never enacted because there was no rules that was set up. So it was a bit on our books as a law, but there was no rules set up. So we tried to go about starting
the
there.
law was to
open
become
it up.
effective once the regulations were put in place. The regulations were never approved by the Illinois State Police,
No, yeah.
and as a consequence, the law was obstructed. And Illinois statute and federal law therefore made you a...
Yeah, it made me a criminal.
You don't look that bad of a criminal.
Well,
Anyway, but that's what the law did, and one of the things that I find so interesting is that we see seizures in Chicago like the one on the screen here, where in June 2012 we seized 8 tons of drugs which came illegally into this country because people wanted to use marijuana recreationally, and because many people needed to use cannabis medicinally. And United Nations treaties, the U.S. Controlled Substances Act, and the state statutes of Illinois criminalized people who fell into either one of those 2 categories. And yet, the prohibition of cannabis produced huge amounts of drugs like you see pictured, and here more recently the United States legalizes marijuana, which has hit the Mexican drug cartels and the border trade. One article that I read said that Mexico is producing 21,500 metric tons of marijuana a year. And yet we are worried about someone getting 2.5 ounces, which is, I believe, the law in Illinois now for medical marijuana, correct?
That's right. 2.5 ounces every 2 weeks, yeah.
So, and then a Mexican drug cartel plants 4,000 marijuana plants 2 miles from my home and my children in a suburb of Cook County. Mm. And we're worried about people who can get medicinal relief from the cannabinoids in a plant that grows naturally.
Right.
Well, so tell me, Illinois did pass a medical marijuana statute. Our Illinois General Assembly helped folks like you and with many other medical conditions, some 36, I believe.
Yep.
And tell me, what was your role in helping get that accomplished?
Well, it was about that time when I started regularly taking the brownie form and finding great relief and weaning myself off all the medications I was on. It's about 2007, I think, was the last medication I removed from the syringe one. That was the last medication that I was taking. I was able to get off the Valium, get off the Sanaflex, Flexeril, Wellbutrin, you know, the list is huge. And so the syringe medication, that was the last one that I weaned off of in 2007, and that was the last one I take. So to this day, since then, I take cannabinoid medicine as my #1 medication, with a backup of codeine, Tylenol with codeine, just when needed, because that one I get, you know, at least not as many side effects as everything else. And I started talking about this, and I got involved with Illinois Normal and said, okay, what can we do? Okay, what can we do to get this, you know, how can I help? And certainly they needed to have a patient, you know, speak about this. And we had some early patients talking about it, but not as vocally, and it was, you know, I just said, okay, let me get this story out and talk to whoever I can. And we would go and visit legislators in Springfield, and every office we would go into, if I came in and I said, I'd like to talk to you about medical marijuana, I would get the door cut in my face and say, oh, we got a caucus, we have a meeting, sorry, we can't talk to you. And I said to my other colleagues, I go, we're not going to make it, we're not going to get anywhere if we got to do something.
We need to talk, at least.
Basically put my foot down to say, I'm never going to say the word marijuana again, well, except tonight, but in the sense of when I talk to others for education, because the more I kept learning about the plant and why that was having such a profound effect on me, and I was reading about cannabinoids and the cannabinoids in the plant and what they were doing in my body, and that we do have a cannabinoid system, and this isn't foreign at all, so I'm not a criminal. And everybody has this system, and these cannabinoids are making me feel better. And I am never going to say that when I'm discussing that with these legislators. I am going to say, yes, I take cannabinoid medicine and medical cannabis, and marijuana is a cultural term. So right there you have, because I could see it every time I'd ask a senator or representative, I'd like to talk to you about marijuana, I could see their head. I could see the, you know,
I had
pictures
a similar experience, but it was different. I would talk about trying to end prohibition. And of course, what that means is to end the war on drugs, prohibition, the Al Capone paradigm, where government says we're going to outlaw these things because they're bad in an effort to try to protect society. And then you end up with the guns and the gangs and the crime and the shooting and the violence and the corruption and the building of prisons till you can't pay for schools.
Right. Yeah.
And I would say, and this is going back 25 some years, I would say, well, we should consider legalizing. As soon as you would say the word legalization or legalize drugs, it would cause brain cramps and whoever. It's like you threw a switch and nothing else you said could be heard.
Could see, yeah.
You said the L word and you're out of the box. Well, what does that mean? It means control and regulation and licensing and measuring what substances go into a pill bottle. It means having a label to know what's in it, to have government supervision so you're not cutting with fentanyl. And we have a substitute medicine here. Let's move all this. Is this the real thing?
Yeah, it is.
Okay. Well, I'm not possessing this. I'm only in the vicinity of this. We have a mysterious looking substance here. It's not Jello. It's not.
Piece of paper.
Piece of paper. You could use this piece of paper right here.
But and so this made it easier to have this discussion. It's like, look, I'm taking, well, they're kind of a little funny looking, but cookies. Taking the cookies. But the legislators, when I would say, yes, I'd like to talk to you about medical cannabis, well, what happens? They were like, oh, what's that? Because now they don't have images of blacklight basements, rock concert, T-shirt laden, people smoking in a dark corner. Here I am showing like just baked goods and going like, this is helping my MS symptoms. So I'm taking that cultural word of marijuana out because it does. The imagery, Al Capone and all the, when you say certain words, they're already laden with such history and weight that doesn't really help the cause. So that's why I stopped saying it. Yes, I take medical cannabis, and that's why we got into many, many doors, and they quit, shutting them on us.
We should mention that it was only about a week ago that there was a press conference which had been called by Representative Kelly Cassidy and also Senator Heather Staines, who had introduced a bill in Illinois that would call for the legalization and control of cannabis.
That's right, yeah.
And WGN carried the story, and it was a little after noon, and the announcer said, we're going to conduct a poll, and do you think that the recreational cannabis should be approved in Illinois? And they came back a little bit later and they said, well, we just can't, we're flabbergasted by these results. It's 93% are saying yes, like there's been some mistake or error here. But nationally, the temperament and belief of American citizens are now coming to recognize we have caused our own problem. We have shot ourselves in the foot with the restoration of Al Capone prohibition that has put more drugs uncontrolled and unregulated everywhere. And now, bit by bit, Illinois, too, is now coming out of the doldrums, the dark ages, the cave. And what do you think of that?
I think it's great. I think I have been behind that from the beginning, but in the sense of first, it's like, incremental steps is that's what we have to do. And so, yes, the Senate bill, it's 316, and the House bill is 2353. And this would allow, adults to have 28 grams to possess, grow, or purchase. So this, to me, goes also in line with, yes, we have the medical bill that's been passed and people are taking advantage of it, which is wonderful, but it is still very strict and narrow. We are one of the only states, of all the medical cannabis states, we're the strictest, and there's a very narrow window that any patient can access this medicine. You have to be on a list of only 30 conditions, and certainly you have to have a relationship with a doctor that's willing to just say that you're their patient and that your condition is on that list of qualifying conditions. But, it should be open up, so legalizing it would open it up for all the other patients that don't have access to this, that would like to try it when they run out of options and all their, taking all these different medications. So I think it's great, hopefully we can,
Yeah, Illinois has had such problems paying the bills that Colorado has shown that their new recreational cannabis law is now producing $1.1 billion, and the projected revenue for Illinois in the event we legalize recreational cannabis would be $350 to $700 million a year in a state that can't pay its pensions.
Yeah.
Now, I want to thank you very much for being with us here. We're going to have to wrap up this show, but congratulations to you and what you've done for the people of Illinois with advocating cannabis reform on Chicago's war on drugs. I'm Jim Gierak. Good night.